Hi, Mark Foxton here, Head of Global Partnerships and Collaborations at Levi Strauss, here to do my one-on-one with ADC partners.
Hi, this is Dave Almy of ADC Partners. Let me ask you this. Is there a more iconic brand than Levi's? I mean, think about it. I only have to say the number's 501, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's both the opportunity and the challenge for Mark Foxton, Levi's point person for global partnerships and collaboration. Mark is charged with figuring out how sports can help Levi's maintain its status as a uniquely American and now global brand. And that involves being on the constant search for athletes, teams, and leagues that can elevate Levi's into, as he puts it, the center of cultural moments. In our discussion, we talk about Mark's remarkably extensive sports marketing background, the importance and difficulty of measuring good partnerships, and the best piece of fashion advice he ever received while working at Levi's. Enjoy. Okay, Mark Foxton, you've been involved in creating partnerships in just about every conceivable form of sports and entertainment property, right? Like teams and facilities and leagues and live events, agencies, right? So on, so on, so on. Can you take a minute and reflect, because you've been at this for a while. Can you reflect on that diverse experience and talk about how it shapes your approach to creating effective partnerships today?
Yeah, I mean, I've had the opportunity and the privilege, as you just said, Dave, to be part of almost, I feel like, every sports league in the country and even on the global side to a certain point in entertainment space. So I always like to tell people I like to build things. So in kind of each step of that, my journey to where I'm at today, I've been able to, I think, build something new, be part of a team, be part of a dynamic group that is stepping into, whether it's a new ownership group, a team that might be relocating a property, that might be starting a new form of advertising and so forth there. I've been able to to continually build things, which ultimately each time you build something, you learn something new, you reflect back on what you've done, how you can do it better, and you get the opportunity to do it again. So, I guess that's kind of, in kind of a high level, I would say
we're all about the 30,000 foot view, Mark Foxton.
Yeah.
We got to start with a big overarching question, but there is kind of a creativity to partnerships as well, isn't there?
Exactly.
I mean, that sort of diving in and figuring out, okay, well, here's what I need. Here's what they need.
Yeah.
Where do those paths cross?
I mean, ultimately, I feel like you've got to build a relationship. I mean, I've had success, I believe, or my success has been tied to a lot of times being able to build those relationships with the other partner where both sides feel, to your point, where we're both understanding what our goals and objectives are, and we're both being able to achieve those. I think in all partnerships, you've got to be able to define what is a goal and objective. It can't just be an emotional buy. There were those days where I think that happened a lot.
Not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore. We're all being accountable.
Yeah.
And so I think, the success comes in being able to define that up front and challenge the other person on the other side of the table to answer that question. And I've been challenged, and I've had to challenge the other folks.
It really is, gosh, it's right at the heart of when these things are so valuable, right? When somebody that you're working with on developing that partnership has a clear-eyed sense of what it is they're trying to do and how they need to go about doing it, right? That's when that clarity is there, that really allows you to put something together that has real value for both parties, right? And those are the long-term relationships that you see. I mean, particularly not only from Levi's, but from your history.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are deals that I have done that I would say, okay, what the outcome is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know that this is probably a short-term deal. And in many ways, you're almost taking the order, so to speak, because somebody's really excited about it. So have we done deals? Have I done deals like that? Certainly. But I think in the end, you want to be able to have a relationship that you can look back on and you can go, this is going to last more than 1 year. These are partnerships versus, transactional advertising moments.
Right. Those are the ones that really dig into the fabric of what that property and that sponsor are trying to do. And I mean, I think that's kind of an important place where you came from, right? Because you have been on the team side. You did spend, I mean, honest to God, you're one of the few people I know who've achieved This is patent pending Dave Elmy, copyright 2022. The quinfecta, right? All you've worked in one form or another with all 5 major professional sports leagues: NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, and Major League Soccer. If you were to look at where those leagues are now, given that you've represented them in some way, shape, or form, and you were going to put partnerships together for one of those leagues, which one would you choose, and why?
It's a good question. Honestly, and this is not trying to cheat the answer, I think each league has continued to evolve in what they're trying to achieve and who they are, and they each have their own personality.
Right. Yeah,
and ultimately, it kind of really comes down to, again, going back to that goals and objective. What am I looking to achieve? So if I sit on the side of Levi's and I have a target, audience demo and things like that, and I'm looking at, Gen Z, I might look at one of the leagues that's targeting that a little bit more. Maybe you might say like the NBA or soccer. When you look at the youth, if you're looking at something for scale, the NFL, baseball, we're a heritage brand, baseball's heritage. So I think each one of them and how they operate. The other thing is the leagues, from the time that I started going back into the 90s to where we are today, they've changed. The rules and rules of engagement, ways of working have changed a lot. So what you can get from as a brand or as a property in a league you can sell, and who owns what, it's always evolving. Again, I think it comes down to, how do you find within the leagues what partner wants to partner and sees the value that you can add from the brand side. Like who's willing to say that, Levi's can come in here, is going to be seen as additive versus just another sponsor name on the wall.
I'm curious, right? We're talking about, a little bit about your history, right? Because you've been with all of those leagues. And you've now been at this, I'm going to say 30 years? 30 years?
30, yeah. I mean, it's scary to say, but about 30 years. So
Sorry.
my first year in Seattle was 91.
Right. So you've been at this 30 plus years, right? And I'm wondering if, like, with all the learning and everything that you've seen, if you could go back and talk to Mark Foxton with the Seattle Mariners, that, still a little dewy eyed around the eyes and like, oh my gosh, it's Major League Baseball. What would you tell him? I mean, what advice do you have for your younger self as someone getting ready to enter into this sports business career and focus so much on partnerships?
I think the thing that I would always say is, you have to voice everything. You have to have a voice. You have to have a voice in the negotiation. You have to listen. Listening is very key.
Sure.
That's probably one of the first things I'd say, is just listen. And treat everything as a partnership, not as kind of a quote sale. I've been on the partnership side for the most part, but treat it as a partnership. Listen, but also ask for the order, ask what you want. So whether that be from what you're doing from the opposite side with a partner, or where you want to go in your career, it's not just results oriented. You've got to be able to show, Mark, you've got to be able to show your results.
Okay.
So whether that's, a balance of art and science, or if you want to move on to a new role, you've got to be vocal. It's no longer just, hey, I earned an A on the paper, so I'm going to get promoted. I earned an A in the partnership, and so those guys are going to renew.
Right.
It's like, if they don't hear it, you don't expect that they're just going to see it.
Yeah. Do you think it's gotten easier or more difficult to show those results, right? When you think back at the beginning, right? Maybe the sponsorships and the partnerships themselves were more simple because it was more like signs and radio and, tickets. And it's become more complex now with digital, but those forms also offer a bit more capability in terms of measurement. I'm wondering if you think, like, have the demands of this channel of marketing become so extreme that it's more difficult to measure and it was easier? Where do you come out on that one?
So I think if I look back and I look at sports conferences I've attended, I actually was doing this, I don't know, not that long ago. I was having a conversation with someone, and I remember in the 90s, one of the key topics of a SBJ type of conference at that time was, why sponsorship works. And then you fast forward into the next decade, and the topic again was why sponsorship works. And you can see where this is going, a theme. And so I feel like there's not a silver bullet. That is a theme that continually is always being asked. So I think the inventory has changed. in a sense, on where we put our emphasis and maybe how we're looking to measure success or what we would define as success, it's still a challenge, because what we're looking at, and whether it's now audience engagement, it used to be you got impressions. So media, yes, you're doing signs. Now it's on camera signage. How do you get in the game? How do you get your logo visible? You can measure that through, media impressions. Like, okay, we got there. But now that was seen as only so much in the relationship. Then it was like, how are we measuring tickets? How are those tickets translating into return on investment? So it's a never ending question. There are, I feel like, a new measurement company every day out there that's trying to tell us on why this works or doesn't work.
We figured it out.
We figured it out. Exactly. We're being asked to speak on panels or, have discussions like this. And can you share with us? And it's like, ultimately, I think everybody has their own definitions that they've come up with. It's just as hard. It's not any easier. It's not any harder. It's always been, I think, a complex situation.
But in fairness, right, every channel struggles to accurately define how effective it can be. I mean, right, because in the end, you can only really get the measurement so far down the purchase funnel, right? At some point, the consumer is going to leave their screen and go, and we really don't know what the ultimate, maybe they just passed by the box of toothpaste that they saw an advertisement on later. It just happened to be handy and on arm's length, and they grab it. So I appreciate what you're saying, right? We've been having this conversation about measurement and results and effectiveness for as long as you and I have both been in this industry. But I sometimes feel like sponsorship is pulled out a little unfairly, maybe because it's just got so many components to it. And each one of those components can be its own challenge.
No, you're right. I mean, I do think that it's because it's not simple. It gets measured unfairly because there's intangibles. Again, it's a little bit of that art and science.
Yeah.
And art is hard to measure. But ultimately, there is that, some people might say, oh, is there an emotional attachment? Are we attached to the success of a team's performance? Sure, that helps. And that gives amplification. Maybe this influencer happened to wear a Levi's jacket and they're now, on the cover of Rolling Stone or something like that. But that being said, there's always a bit of that balancing act on how do you present a successful partnership back with when the internal sell and the external sells in the partner. And, there is a bit of just earned equity that you have to trust and kind of, it's part of the marketing mix and believe in.
Well, it kind of goes back to what you just said about like, look, it's like people care about this team or this league or this player. And by caring at them, they are focusing their attention on them, right? Is that always measurable? No, but intrinsically, I think we all understand that there's incredible value associated with that. And you talked about it, like, we've been having this conversation for 20 years. I've been having that conversation for 20 years. Why does sponsorship work? Well, of course it works. Go look on a freezing cold day in Green Bay. You've got 70,000 people sitting around a football team, right? Right. There's not care and value and importance there. I mean, I don't know how else you measure it.
Yeah, sports is that one. It's not the one thing, but it is one thing where people constantly show up. And as you were talking about the leagues, it's interesting. We build new stadiums. They're filled up. We add new sports. We had, what was a big 4, now a big 5, might be a big 6. People, there's the passion, there's emotion, there's attachment. We've all lived it, breathed it, whether it's been directly with us or extended through family members at our company. And it's just, so, there's that piece that is somewhat not measurable, but you do know they're there. People show up.
And if there is ultimately the big 6, obviously you have to leave Levi's to go work for the big 6th league to make sure that you keep that collection of having done all those leagues together. I want to make sure your streak stays alive.
Yes.
You're welcome for that, by the way. I'm looking out for you.
Yes, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. Yes.
Let's shift over and talk a little bit about Levi's, right? So you've been there a little over 10 years. And a little over 10 years?
No, it's actually, sorry, I'll go back. I've been there. We might want to rephrase this. I've been there since 2014. I came on board right as the stadium was opening. So 2014, so about 8.5, almost 8.5 years.
Okay. Well, you round up, it's 10.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take 10.
Round up. Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
So I
But
get
this,
10. Is anybody listening from Levi's? No.
yeah, what does that do to my 401k?
Yeah. Did I
All
get a
right,
sabbatical?
but Levi's is a fascinating from a brand standpoint, right?
Right.
Because it's iconic. I mean, it's one of probably the most iconic brands that has ever come out of American business, right? It's almost like the pant is the brand. It's like the Band-Aid is the Band-Aid and Levi's is the pants. But it means so much more than that. I mean, it's like Levi's is what, when you go to another country and people think about America, they think about Levi's and things like that. With a brand that's that iconic, can you talk a little bit about the role that sports and sports marketing play in taking that iconic brand and shaping it for different audiences? What's the role that sports does play for that?
Yeah, we're not a performance brand. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we're a heritage brand that's been around. I mean, next year is the 150th anniversary of the 501.
Whoa.
The patent of the blue jean, May 20th every year. That's always the birthday of the blue jean. And to your
Mm,
point, the blue jean.
right.
So I'm proud to be able to say that. But with that being said, we're not a performance brand. We're not on the field of play in most cases when it comes to sports, with the exception of maybe when you look at bull riding or BMX riding, some of those kind
Okay,
of
fair enough. Yep.
non-traditional sports. But what we are, you just said it. There's 70,000 people in Green Bay.
Right.
What are they on? We're the fans' uniform.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
And so, I always start with like, we're there, we're present at every game, we're present at every sports moment throughout that 150-year blue jean run with the 501. They've been worn at all these moments in sports. And so it gives us kind of that permission, so to speak, to be there. Some people, again, we're not on the field, but we're there with the fan. And so sports for us, we see that as, center of culture moments,
Mm,
things that matter for people. Sports are part of that. And we want to be present at center of culture moments. We want to be able to add value to those moments. So sports, and when we see those gatherings of folks, at games, whether it's at Levi's Stadium here or not, it's what is Levi's bringing to that event that's going to enhance the experience of the fan that's there on any given game day.
mm-hmm. So it's like that's fascinating to hear that being at a cultural moment. The one that stuck out to me there was fan uniform, right? People getting ready to go to the games or even just to sit on the couch at home, right? You
Mm-hmm.
want something that's going to be comfortable and functional in all those moments. So while you're not on the field of play, you are so still tight to the action for all the people that are around you. So you want to try to insert that brand into that consciousness at that moment, right?
Correct.
What are some of the ways that have been super effective for you in that? Can you look back on like activations or partnerships that you've done and said, yeah, that's it. That's what we're looking for in terms of being at that moment of zeitgeist, or however we want to phrase it?
I mean, I think there's a few different touch points. When we go into a partnership, we'll look at, how do we connect with, influencers? It might be the
Mm-hmm.
players, it might be the team. So in that case, it's, you're hoping to be able to connect and find those authentic Levi's wear. Is there a way that the product can be, while we're not on the field of play, are we part of their life?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to know, what a player's doing on and off the field. You look at walk-ins these days in the NBA, which is now the walk-in in every sport. What is everybody wearing? People tune in for that sometimes more than they tune in. They tune in the game, and so it's like, how are we part of that moment, right? When you're coming in there, so we look to find ways to touch and feel, and whether we're outfitting and doing private fittings for teams that they're for them specifically, or the front offices or
Oh,
shopping
wow.
days. Those
Yeah.
have been great. Guys have come in and just, they kind of discover that there's more sometimes than just a 501 too. That's the
Right.
thing. They really realize that, we have a lot to offer, a lot of different fits for guys. We introduced a 541 jean back in 2014, which was our athletic fit. It's where those guys, they have, the big thighs, they can't always sneak into maybe a traditional pair of jeans. Well, we introduced
It's kind of
that,
what I
like,
think I'm sporting right now. The old
yeah.
541.
But that gene, we had great success and great launch, and we launched it with NFL players, the guys that like came to us and said, you know what, we can't find a fit that works. And so I'd say it's part of the success is finding solutions for them.
Yeah.
And then on the fan side, we've been able to create licensed gear, not just for game day, how do you go and celebrate your team? What can you wear, not just on Sunday
Yeah.
and the rest of the week, to be proud of, whether you're a 49ers fan, a Giants fan, or another team, having that opportunity there and the success that we've seen that fans have asked for and wanted to have our gear.
Yeah.
Because again, we're not a performance brand. We're not maybe traditionally thought of in the sports license space. So it's a little bit of white space there that we've been able to carve out.
But it's fascinating. You brought up the idea of the walk-in now, and that has become such a new part of the sports experience, right? What are the players wearing as they walk into the stadium or as they enter into before they head into the dressing room? I'm assuming that a lot of that is because social media now has become such an important part of the sports experience. I mean, do you see that as you're thinking about your activation? So much of this is visual and capturing those moments. I'm assuming that has to play a pretty central role in everything you think about now.
Yeah, I mean, storytelling, right?
Right.
It's storytelling, and that's
Okay.
part of what I didn't speak to earlier. When we have success, it's like, how are we being able to tell the story, whether we're at that event with that partner specifically, if it's an athlete, if it's a values moment that we want to have, and we're speaking through, we're talking about one of our many values, whether it's inclusivity and diversity and so forth there, and even around voting, we did some things back in the last election period, worked with a few athletes there to be able to storytell through the authentic voice of those individuals. But social media definitely plays a role in that. How are we creating content and assets that can both live on our channels and on the partners, whether that partner is an athlete or whether it's a property like the 49ers or the Giants?
And it also has changed the way I think, particularly people now root for sports. I think when you and I were kids, we had our favorite teams and we followed those teams. We had famous, favorite players on those teams and things like that. Now, I think you're more of people are LeBron James fans. And if he's playing for the Heat, I'm a Heat fan. If he's playing for the Cavs, I'm a Cavs fan. If he's playing for the Lakers, I'm a Lakers fan, because they have created these presences in social media that allow people to feel they're connected to them. And that's a real opportunity for fashion, isn't it?
It is, because I think there definitely are those players that stand out and influence, what a kid's going to wear on the court, or what you see them as they're coming in. And, you see that every day. And I still think there is a bit of the fan that roots for their team, but I feel like the fan is influenced more by maybe a player who isn't on their team.
That's a good point.
Whereas before they didn't maybe care, or they were almost considered the enemy, right? But now you're like, okay, wait, but I kind of like what they're wearing. Yeah.
That's what I do. That's how I base my entire look, is on the walk-in.
Right. I mean, they've got, you've got all these media outlets now that have specific channels on, every night on an NBA week game or, whatnot. If you're looking at, some of the media partners, and they measure that, there's awards given at the end of the year for, best dressed, and so forth. But I mean, it's something that we look at.
I never competed for that.
It. I know. Yeah. We monitor that as we look at, again, those authentic partners, like who's moving the needle, who's influencing fashion. It's no longer just maybe a musician or a designer. Athletes are, smack dab in the middle of that as well.
Probably in ways that they've never ever been before, right? They're so present. They're not behind helmets or anymore, or distant on the field. It's so present. Yeah, and staying on top of that has to be central to what you do. You brought up a minute ago the idea of licensing, and I know you obviously have this deep, rich history in creating partnerships and enjoy that aspect of it quite a lot. Can you talk a little bit about the role that licensing plays with that? And because that's a bit of a different approach from maybe some of the things that you've done in the past. I mean, what was your learning curve with licensing, and how important is it for what you're doing right now?
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, I think when I got into Levi's, and I mean, this has been the longest tenure I've had at a company. Within teams, you sometimes move around. Like I mentioned, you always want to build things. I had the opportunity early on, as we were opening the stadium, to be part of the team that at the same time was exploring sports licensing and looking again how we could hit that white space of not just for game day. And it's definitely a different type of a partnership. I mean, for Levi's, from where we stand, it's very important because it allows us to still reach and speak to the sports fan through our actual product.
Right.
So for us, licensing has been very important. We've come and gone in certain sports in the licensing space. It's
Mm-hmm.
definitely a complicated landscape. It's very fragmented. I mean, just like sponsorship in general. So in many ways, it's very similar in the
Mm-hmm.
sense of that fragmentation. Every league's a little bit different. There's different rights between the local, global, national, and so forth. But and I had to learn all those. It's kind of like you had a chance to kind of relearn the sponsorship landscape through the lens of licensing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at the same time, it's not for everyone either. I think it's one of those ways that for a brand like Levi's, licensing does make a lot of sense. I think there's others that sometimes maybe it doesn't. So yeah, I mean, we see that across our collaborations. I work a lot also on our non-sports, collaborations on the marketing side. So we have licensing partnerships there. We have partnerships with various designers. It's very similar, and it's allowed me to kind of learn that side of the business and expand some of the things that I'm doing on a daily basis within the walls of Levi's.
Yeah, it is super complex because, like you said, there are a number of players on there. I guess one of the benefits associated with though it is inherently measurable because it needs to
Yeah.
translate directly into sales. So there should be a fairly close connection point, right? If a jacket with a logo on it sells better than the jacket without the logo on it, then I guess it's a positive response. I mean, I guess going back to the idea of measurement.
Yeah, there's two ways that we kind of look at it from a licensing standpoint to that point. There is, call it scale and volume,
Mm-hmm.
in which you can look at, how many units did you sell? That is measurable. But there's also energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have the opportunity, I think with
Art and science,
partnerships,
man. There it
yeah,
is again.
yeah, in sponsorship, you want that opportunity to be able to be a little bit maybe disruptive, create energy, premiumize a brand,
Mm-hmm.
maybe aspirational. So our licensing pieces allow us to jump in and be able to be present at those center of culture moments.
Right.
And it's not always about volume. It can be scarcity that creates energy that then is for, overall trickles down to the brand.
Lines at stores,
Yeah.
right? And making sure that people are engaged. What else are you working on right now? What else is the brand involved in sports particular that you're working on right now that has kind of got your attention, kind of got you a little bit excited about what you're seeing from? Because we know, obviously, there's the stadium, Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, almost said San Francisco, Santa Clara, California. That's obviously a significant one. You obviously have a big deal with the San Francisco Giants, and those are very, very important hometown deals. But what are some of the other things that are out that you're participating in that you look at and go, yeah, that's right on point?
Yeah. We've been able to work on within other team markets. We have, key cities that we work in, and we look at whether it's the cities in the US of like a Los Angeles or New York, and are there opportunities to show up at key events
Mm-hmm.
and center cultures I mentioned. I get excited when we're activating at All-Star for NBA, when we're at Super Bowl, whether we're doing things around that. Other partners that come to us and almost want to say, hey, how can we work together collectively to tell a bigger and better story? Like, how does your product enhance what we're doing on the ground? Like, we have a lot of those conversations. I would say, the esports space, we entered in that about 2 years ago. We're still figuring it out. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you're always learning there, but that was something that, we spent a fair amount of time evaluating, how do we enter? And now we've gotten in. And so it's like that one we're still building and figuring out kind of as we go. But that's really interesting. And then, on the global side of things, we've had a handful of different soccer, football partnerships,
Mm-hmm.
primarily over in Europe. And those teams, they operate different in many ways. It's not, there's a lot more independence as opposed to going to the league. So each of the, I think it's, as I've expanded outside of the US and looked at other opportunities in other countries, each sport in each country is a little bit different than how we operate here. But the one thing I will say, it's interesting that other teams and other folks look back at the US and we're oftentimes told, like, you guys have figured out sponsorship. I mean, not meaning Levi's in sense, but just like kind of
Yeah.
US sports, because they look at the
Yeah.
dollars, look at the sponsors. We don't just have the single, maybe, kit partner that you see in,
Yeah.
the EPL, which is phenomenal dollars. But it's interesting that I hear that because I think we're all still trying to figure it out. I mean,
It's ironic given what we were
yeah,
talking about just
yeah,
a little while ago, right? 20
yeah,
years in, we're still like, why is sponsorship important?
yeah,
Oh, don't worry, you guys got it figured out.
right. And the last thing I'll just say, and not to ramble on here, right? But I mean, as we kind of look at our company, we have the global lens, and then we have, call it 3 to 7 sort of clusters or different areas that we look at, up to 7
Yeah.
globally. And so within each one of those, it's like, how does sports play a role?
Yeah.
Like, because it's challenging to find one property that you can just jump into and say, okay, we're gonna, stick a flag here,
Yep.
and that's gonna translate everywhere.
Yep.
Right. And so that's been one of the biggest challenges I've been asked by our company. Like, oh, hey, can you go find a property that can speak to everyone? And I'm always like, well, I don't know.
Can you be
yeah,
magic?
right. And so, but it's fun. It's a nice challenge, right? And,
Sure.
and so those are the conversations that I think I have, and I'm challenging when I'm speaking with them about new opportunities and new ways to get involved. I mean, we were part of the Olympic Games last year, and we outfitted the US BMX freestyle team. That was something new. It was fun. It's like, okay, we're now in, action sports. We've been involved in skate for a number of years. What does that look like? There's things, bull riding. We outfit a couple guys that are on.
Not yet an Olympic sport, people.
Not an Olympic sport, but
not yet.
Within that space of, kind of moving outside of traditional team sports. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when literally the world is a potential customer for your product, I can understand why your chief marketing officer might look at you and say, well, what's the one thing that applies to everybody? And having to be a little bit like, right? Particularly as you go to different regions around the world.
Right.
I mean, it's a fascinating challenge. All right, so let's take that then. Let's use that and use this as our catalyst towards the end. So as you look to the future, and you look to some of the things that you've done, Olympics and BMX bike teams, and you say you're in esports. What are some of the other things that catch your eye? What are some of the other things that you're starting to pay attention to that you think, maybe it's not an opportunity now, but if the trajectory continues the way that it's going, what do you want to pay attention to?
I'm still curious to watch the positioning between athlete and property. And what I mean by that is, you mentioned it earlier, like, do you follow the athlete or do you follow the property? I mean, athletes are more and more becoming their own brand. They're encouraged to be their own brand.
Right.
And so as we sit back where I'm at from a brand, you're just like, okay, who do you want to partner or connect with?
Yep.
How are we getting there? Is it the property? Is it the athlete? Is it the event, that moment? And how is the audience consuming that? So, everybody talks about, we're not watching as many things on television. Things are being consumed more through streaming. Live sports, I think everybody will admit, is still happening, in real time and being consumed that way. The numbers would show that. So it's one, still, how do you connect there? But then how do you get to, for us, it's always like that next consumer, that next fan of Levi. So whether it's Gen Z, as everybody else is trying to get to, but where is that intersection with sports in that consumer, and what's the story that we need to tell?
Yeah, boy, it goes back to the idea of storytelling, doesn't it? That ability to communicate what Levi's is to the next generation, right? Yeah. Because they're going to form those opinions as they go. Mark Foxton of Levi's, appreciate you spending the time to hash out some of these things. But before I let you go, we are going to enter the lightning round. These are a series of questions that I need short, emphatic responses to. Are you ready?
I will do my best, Dave.
Okay. Deep breaths. Okay. What's your go-to Levi jean cut?
501.
Classics. All right. You can be the commissioner of one of the 5 major pro sports leagues. Which one?
NBA.
Okay, easy. You worked in New York City for years. What do you miss the most?
The food.
Anything in particular?
All of it.
Come on, you live in the Bay Area, man. It's not like it's a terrible food one-way desert or anything like that.
Okay, let me take that back. I would say the thing I miss the most is probably the energy.
Okay, right. Always on.
Yep.
What's left on your sports bucket list?
I still never made it out to the Masters. That's a story for another day.
All right, well, that's going to be volume 2.
And I have yet to see in person F1 race.
Ooh, all right, well, let's see what we can do about that.
Those are probably the 2 right now, sitting at the top. Yeah.
All right, lightning round. All right, last one. What is the most important piece of fashion advice you've ever gotten while working for Levi's?
Wear what you're most comfortable in.
I don't know how it gets any better than that. Mark Foxton, head of global partnerships and connections for Levi Strauss. Thanks for spending the time, man.
Thanks, Dave. It's been fun.
Thanks for listening to this ADC Partners podcast. For more information about ADC Partners, please visit our website at adcpartners.com.